Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Staying Power, a show that is all about building a better life. Every week, we come together to talk about one small segment of what that might actually mean, and we've never seemed to run out of topics. And we're hoping that this week's topic, as well as every week's topic, resonates with you in some way, shape, or form. By we, I mean myself, JDK Wyneken, and the other part of the Staying Power team, the straw that stirs the drink that is this show, the lovely Ashley Knebel. Hi, Ashley.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing so great today. How are you?
You know what? I'm well. I'm a little tired
Oh,
today. Not as much sleep as I would have liked to have gotten, but I am persevering. So
great. Well, thanks for showing up.
yeah, no, thank you. And thank you to listeners for showing up today and joining us. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of holding space in our lives in particular, in the relationships in which somebody else needs to have a space to grow into, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that looks like inequality, perhaps in a relationship. One side perhaps investing more, giving more, being more patient, that type of thing. That's what we're going to talk about today because it's a branch off of our last couple of episodes that were about unrequited love, which got a lot of feedback from listeners. Thank you so much for those of you who let us know that you enjoyed that. Nobody let us know that they didn't enjoy that. So that's that's good.
We welcome those comments.
We
It's good to
do.
have all sorts of feedback.
We do. So I wouldn't shy away from it because it's certainly an uncomfortable subject. And today's one perhaps could be uncomfortable if any of you listening are in a situation where you feel like you and a really important person in your life, whatever the relationship is, are not where you used to be, not on equal footing. Maybe the way you frame that is you're growing in different directions, or perhaps there's been more growth for one person than another in a certain area, and that's a particularly important area in that relationship. What we're going to suggest today is the importance of not just hitting the eject button, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And both Ashley and I have a lot to share about this today. So, Ashley is a place to start with that. Have you ever been is there a relationship that comes to mind where that kind of inequality or imbalance is there? And how has it felt? Or how did you grow up? That'd be another way. How did you grow up hearing about how to handle unequal elements of relationships?
Okay. That's a good question. I don't know if I necessarily was raised with construction instructions about how to handle something like that. I have certainly gone through things, and as an adult now feel like I could give some little nuggets of wisdom to somebody who's younger than I am going through things. But I have gone through them, and I'm sure somebody could say that they've gone through it with me and that they had to hold space for me without me realizing it.
Me too.
But I have definitely been on the side of that street where I was the one holding space for a particular person that I cared deeply about. And it wasn't for like an argument's sake or a weekend's sake or anything. It was for a very extensive, long period of time, like months worth of time. And it's not like I decided, okay, I'm going to put a timeline on this. And if they don't get their self together in this amount of time, I'm out. I didn't think that. I honestly didn't know if it would ever come to an end. Because you don't know. As people, it really depends on what you're holding space for, right? If someone is just
that's true.
going through some hardships in life and you're just there to like be a soundboard and a comfort and a vault for them to vent in and seal up when they leave, that's kind of like an ongoing thing. But when people are dealing with their own internal struggles, but it directly affects you, whether they take it out on you, it's their daily habits and you like live together or whatnot, when it has a harsh effect on you, the long term of that can be devastating if you don't keep yourself in a good, healthy place. And it's a true gift to give to somebody if you can do that. Now, not to do it as the detriment to yourself
Sure,
because,
sure.
like I said, it really can.
Mhm.
Um, but to be able to sit and be ever consistent in loving and supportive and have their back. I have been in that situation, and it has
Mhm.
really actually shaped a good portion of who I am today
Mm.
because I've gone through something like that,
Yeah. I don't.
and I'm grateful for it. It was rough,
Mhm.
but I'm grateful for it.
Mhm. And it has improved, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was much leaps and bounds different after they went through what they needed to go through and grew through it, and I think that they still probably have some healing to do, but where they're at now today as an individual, I'm really proud of them for
Mhm.
who they have become and what they have accomplished in that time, and makes it a lot easier for me to be around them.
Sure, sure. And the reason I asked that is, I mean, you mentioned just a second ago that you didn't put a time limit on it,
Mhm.
right? And certainly, I think depending again on what it is, right? We'll talk a little bit about, establishing, boundaries around
Sure.
these things because it depends on what it is. If we're talking about something that's overtly abusive, we're obviously not
Yeah,
suggesting that you
yeah.
should stay with that and give someone space to not be abusive anymore, right? There are lines here, but you're talking about someone working through a great deal of things, right,
Mhm,
that were adversely affecting you and you making a conscious decision to give them space to work through that,
mhm,
hold on to that. And you mentioned something really important at the end, taking care of yourself.
mm,
In the midst of that,
mhm.
how did you take care of yourself?
Well, most days it felt like I was not taking care of
Mm,
myself, to be honest
that's
with you.
honest, yeah.
I started to observe and make note, but that really actually came about because I had a couple of people who were very, very, very close to me, who know me well, that were like, "I see you struggling and you're going through something, and make sure you take time for yourself too." It was really
Mhm.
enlightening to have someone actually tell you that.
Mm,
But I made sure I still did things for myself, and I know that sounds kind of cliche, but I spent a period of time realizing how much of myself was being sacrificed unconsciously
mhm,
for said person. And when I made those observations, I'm like, "Oh, most of my thoughts are, like, centered around what will make their day better. What can I do to improve that?" And never was I thinking, like, "What can I do to make my day better?"
mm,
Little things like that. And I was like, "Oh, well, why would I not think about myself in that way? If I'm gonna think about them, I should think about me too." And so I started doing that. And if I felt like, "You know what? I wanna go out for a walk, and I wanna go get a cup of coffee, and I wanna go do I don't know what," I would do it.
mm,
And, like, little things like that that compounded really helped. And again, they sound a bit cliche, but they really made a difference. And
mhm,
even the fact that I would stop myself because I would catch myself being like, "Okay, I am stretching myself beyond what I would normally do and sacrificing something of myself to create a better environment for them." And I'm like, "Is it okay if it's not better for them? Would the
mm.
uncomfortableness in the environment actually maybe help prompt something for them?"
Yes.
And that realization, I was
The
like,
answer is yes.
I mean, depending on what it is, right?
Right.
But I was like, "You know what? It's okay to not overextend today."
Yeah.
And little things like that, it's like I started winning my own energy back,
Mhm,
and it made me feel a lot better. And I was like, I'm going to start putting myself forward first
mhm.
instead of that other person.
Yeah. And it does present them with a a reality check. It
Mhm.
can. That their space is theirs to work through in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be really easy in a situation like you're describing, and I've been in that myself in my own way. It can be easy to wake up each morning when you're on that side of the ledger that you're talking about and realize that however somebody else is doing is gonna determine what kind of day you have.
Mhm.
And I remember the first time that was presented to me, um, as, you're waking up every day and this whatever this person says, does, doesn't do, does do, is going to determine the kind of moment or day you're gonna have. How can you reclaim that? I remember being shocked by that idea. But there really is truth to that. And what you're describing is kind of taking your day back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
In that
taking
way.
back your power.
Yeah, it is, and it does present that person on the other side of that with sometimes some uncomfortable realities to sit with, because
Mhm.
one of the things that I've noticed in those unequal elements is that the person who is kind of working through stuff, who the space is being held for, it may not see what's happening until the status quo gets shifted, even in the
Mhm.
subtle ways that you're talking about, subtle but real ways, right? Boundaries, right? Doing things for yourself, right? Disengaging when necessary, all of that. And it's scary, isn't it? Because you don't know if that person's really going to see that, make that
Agreed.
change, grow into it, if they're going to help themselves. It's tough. And
Mhm.
lest anyone think that somehow this is an anomaly. This happens in every relationship.
Yeah,
Every
it does.
relationship goes through something. Now we're talking about a significant one where, in the case of what we're both talking about, you're talking about, really important relationship that these things have to even out if it's going to
Right,
be
right.
successful. There has to be adjustments. But, the kind of tying it back to last week, we talked about loving the way Anthony DeMello talked about it, is seeing another person, right, with a capital S, observing, accepting where they are. That involves ourselves too. We have to see ourselves in that situation.
Mhm.
Is this other person determining the day I'm going to have? Am I doing things for myself? Observing the dynamic, right? Accepting that you're in that spot, but not that you just have to keep staying in that spot,
Right.
right? Those kinds of things. Um, yeah, and the good news is, and one of the reasons I like talking about this with clients and with you is the more we do, like what you described for yourself, and the more that the other person responds to that and wrestles with that, the more that gets into our neurobiology, and we start developing new habits, new pathways,
Mhm.
new ways of looking at
Yep.
ourselves, new ways of behaving, new ways of seeing the other person and accepting them. And then we can start talking about, when we can start doing that. And in this case, to jump a little bit on what you were saying, I'm sure once you started taking that space and drawing those lines and doing those things, that opened up a whole lot of new ways for you to be framing what was possible.
Mhm.
Maybe a lot of questions that weren't always answerable, but certainly more than the reality that you were facing, and that despondence that can come in where you're like, this is never going to change.
Yeah. Well, and there was a piece to that, and as you were saying, kind of seeing and observing yourself, and I know you were kind of saying it in, like, more of, like, the loving
Yeah.
acceptance portion.
Hmm.
There was some time when I observed and I was like, "Are some of the things that I'm doing causing their behavior?"
Or
And it
making it
was.
worse. Yeah. Right. Right.
Actually, I'll
Yeah.
take full ownership. It was.
Triggering stuff, huh?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
well." Funny enough, when I decided to change some of the stuff that I was doing, I it took it took time for them to believe me that I was no longer doing that. It took, like, repetitious, examples,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
It's kinda like telling somebody, like, "Okay, I promise I'm always gonna, clean up my socks off the floor." And they do it once, you're like, "Okay, great." And then they
Hmm.
do it again, you're like, "Yeah, but they're gonna forget the 3rd or 4th time." But then they keep doing it, and then eventually weeks go by, you're like, "Wow, I've never seen the socks on the floor again."
Yeah.
That was not what was going on.
Okay.
Uh, just an example, but, eventually, like, when I changed some of the things that I was doing, I was like, "Wow." It just showed me so much how much it affected them,
Hmm.
and I think that also opened their eyes to be like, "Whoa, some of the stuff I'm doing might be affecting her."
Oh, I
It
love
was
that.
great, and this wasn't like a conversation that was spoken aloud.
Right.
It was almost more interesting because it was not spoken aloud, and to
Hmm.
just watch the effect
Almost
of.
an intuitive development.
Mhm,
Yeah. Interesting.
but I had to do that homework myself.
I like that, because that's a great place for us to go into our first break, because that talks about our own responsibility, right? In
It's
an
true.
unequal relationship, finding those lines where they are and how to navigate through them is the number one challenge. So when we come back from our first break, we'll continue this discussion, talk a little bit about how we can start to maybe measure all this. And then before we do, by the time we come back, be thinking of the one area in your life where there might be some imbalance. Maybe that's a better word than inequality. Some imbalance that is affecting things that maybe resonates with you. And just hold on to that for the remainder of the conversation, because we're going to dig into some things that we can do to recognize these things and some things that we can do to mitigate them and move beyond them. We'll be right back here on Staying Power.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diaspora, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diaspora offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diaspora Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Imagine home. The smell of coffee, the sound of a lawnmower, the sun's warmth on your face. Free to be yourself, surrounded by love that helps you grow. This is a place to call home. That's an American dream we all deserve. But in 50% of US states, you could legally be denied housing if you are LGBTQ+. Get the facts and hear real stories at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Going our own way every day. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hey, welcome back to Staying Power. JD here with Ashley.
Hello.
And we are talking about holding space for others in relationships, particularly when there is tension, perhaps different areas of growth, perhaps the fear of diverging out of the center part of the relationship, or things are changing, how we can address that. And there's a lot to be said about that. And so we hope you're enjoying this episode wherever you happen to be. And remember, if you ended up missing any of this or would like to catch up on our other episodes, you can catch Staying Power as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow our YouTube channel where we live stream every episode. You can also find out more about us at our radio home, 1150 AM KKNW in Seattle. And at all of those sites in the show notes, you can find not only information about that each week's episode, but all the links in the ways in which you can communicate with us. Our email is stayingpowershow@gmail.com, and our social media links are in there. We'd love to hear from you and build up this conversation further. So before we jump back into this, and Ashley, thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
In-depth vulnerability at the front end of this. We want to go into our weekly segment this week where Ashley and I each take 2 minutes to talk about something that was either a triumph or a terror from the past week and what we did with it and what we learned. And it's all in the name of sharing our growth and vulnerability with each other as well as with you, and hope it encourages you to do the same. This week, I'm happy to say it is 2 minutes of triumph. Here we go.
Yes.
All right. I love the yes. I get so excited about it every time.
Too much. I know.
Even Eric behind the board gets excited about it too. It's yeah, he should. He's the one who put that together. That's his genius.
Proud of him over there.
Yeah, yes. All right. Ashley, what have you got for a triumph?
You know what I did? I did a little something for myself.
What'd you do?
Considering what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I hired myself a coach.
Whoa, coaching, a coach getting a coach.
I know. That's a thing.
That is a thing. It's an important thing.
This one is a little bit more of a specific area of expertise that I really needed some help and assistance in. And I hired her, and it is going exponentially well. I'm already seeing results, which I'm like, great, love. Learning a lot, and I'm really excited just to see where things are going to leap and bound to.
Wow. So is it kind of external results, internal results, a little bit of both? Like, what are you learning from this? External.
It's very much like management, business.
Oh, gotcha.
Coaching.
Gotcha.
Expertise.
And but what's that doing for you internally? Because I guarantee that has some sort of effect.
It is giving me some hope that I can become somebody that I've always envisioned myself to be. It has helped me restructure some things, so I have a little less stress in my back pocket now that I don't have to carry with me anymore. So it's very new. I've only been working with her for a few weeks, but it's already made a big difference.
That is great. And actually I have to say, I've observed that,
Really?
again, one of those things where it
Oh,
isn't spoken. You were talking about
yes.
that last segment, not spoken, but I can tell.
Mhm.
I think something in your demeanor around these various subjects is less heavy of late.
Yay!
I think that's great.
Thanks.
Having a coach is important. It's so funny too that you chose a coach because that's my 2 minutes to
Really?
triumph. Yeah. I've shared with listeners before that I've had a health and fitness coach for about the
Mhm.
last year. My friend Sean Ferguson down in LA, and he's amazing. I've had a lot of flux in my schedule the last few months, a lot of uncertainty. I've shared with that on the air. And so my schedule for everything I was doing with him that was going so well just got completely shot to hell over the last few months. And
Obliterated.
I have been trying to work my way back. And I finally reached out to him just a few days ago and said, "Hey, you know what? I'm trying to work my way back and I can't get back. Can we set up a meeting and talk?" And literally just happened a couple of hours ago.
Oh,
And
wow.
my coaching sessions with him are always so good. We've known each other
Mhm.
for a long time, so there's
Nice.
friendship behind it too. But his coaching is so excellent because it gets me past the clutter in my head and the emotional weight and kind of internal condemnation I put on myself for not doing everything as well as I think I should be able to, or as well as I've done it before.
Mhm.
And he always helps me see those things and helps me set a new plan that's realistic. And so I'm feeling a lot lighter today too. So that was funny. 2 coaches getting coaches. It just goes to show that this
Wow.
type of thing can help anybody, even if your thing is helping other people, right?
It's
That's
very
great.
true.
All right. Thanks. Congratulations on that, Ashley.
Well, you
That's great.
too,
Thank you.
but
Appreciate
thanks.
that. All right. Getting back to our subject of holding space for people. Well, what what struck me when before we go into the break and you were talking about paying attention to yourself, right? And kind of actively observing
Mhm.
yourself and actively observing the other. Got me think about the importance of things when addressing these with ourselves and with others about things like active listening, right? And doing so without judgment when somebody else is talking or when you're kind of assessing something. Um, because the thing that oftentimes people ask me is, what does it actually mean to hold space?
Oh, that's a
Right?
very good question.
Yeah, because we suggested strongly that it doesn't mean you just hold it open and let someone bounce around in it forever and beat you up in the middle of it, doesn't mean that. We're talking about something very intentional,
Mhm.
right? Very very open and fluid perhaps depending on how it's applied, and of course 2 people are in every relationship, so the other person has something to do with that. Um but holding space, the way I would roughly define it for everyone, is really the concept and practice of creating a safe, non judgmental environment in which you and another person, whatever the relationship is, can grow, and then in which they can grow on their own, even if it does mean, as you suggested, some discomfort on their part because the old ways of engagement you begin to shift.
Right.
So let's talk about it from that standpoint, creating a safe, non judgmental environment for others to grow. Um, what are some of the things that come up for you? I know, uh, you've suggested a few,
Hmm.
but the practices, you mentioned kind of mindfulness, like, what am I bringing
Oh,
to this,
yes.
right? There's something of that. What else kinda came into that? And I'm not just gonna have you talk about this particular relationship you're in for the whole time, because I can share with this too, but I'm asking you first, what else comes up? Like, what are the other ingredients of that besides the mindfulness of looking at yourself? What
Hmm.
else comes up for you?
Well, I would say kind of mirroring what you said about allowing them to have time, knowing to work through what they're working through, love them through it regardless.
Mm,
And there was at least an element for me, if I'm really going personal, of not taking things so personally,
mm.
even though they might have been meant as personal.
Oh, that must
And
have been tough.
I realized that I'm like, this is a them thing. This is not a me thing.
Ooh.
And it is personal because it's personal for them.
Mm,
And what they're saying or what they're doing right now, while it's directed at me, it actually has nothing to do with me.
mm,
And it has something to do with them and something they need to figure out and work through. And coming to that realization actually felt really good. And it was something that I kept in mind
mhm,
of remember that there's going to be some rough patches. There's going to be some abrasive things. It's
Hurt
not always
feelings,
going to be
sure,
pleasant. Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And every right to feel the hurt feelings that you have if
Mhm,
something is done or said that is hurtful, of course.
mhm,
But at the same time, I'm like, okay, good to set up boundaries. But if I'm going to be here and hold space for this person, I can't take it personally because
mm,
I'm also choosing to be here.
right.
So understand the battle you picked
Yeah, that's
and
interesting.
armor up, but remember you're still in a battle that you picked.
Right. That's that's a really good analogy.
You
You know
know?
what that reminds me of is the great, psychologist and researcher P.M. Melody once described that as learning how to let those things pass through you almost like a
Yeah.
ghost.
Oh, that's
The
great.
words, the actions, the energy, which is a practice, so that takes time,
Takes
and
time.
it's important to get real professional help with that.
Mhm.
Coaches are great, but therapists are even better with that because they can dig deeper in some ways. That's the important part. And certainly having support from people around you who know
Mhm.
that and have maybe done that themselves,
Yeah.
all that fits. But letting that pass through you and recognizing that, yes, they might be making it about you in that moment, but it really isn't
Yeah.
about you. I love that because there's compassion in that. And compassion, of course, is the root of empathy,
Mhm.
recognizing that. I know that when I've been in situations like that, and the situation that comes forward for me is I was in the opposite chair.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah. A few years ago, I was in the opposite chair. And I remember having the experience of recognizing after a lot of back and forth where I think the person I'm talking about, I'm still very close with this person, was kind of in the spot you were talking about for you,
Mhm.
where I couldn't fathom from my seat, why is she doing this? Or why is she, it could be disengaging or having a boundary, clearly, or letting stuff go through it. Nothing what I was doing. I wasn't trying to cause pain. I wasn't trying to cause harm. I wasn't trying to be mean. I was trying to connect. I was trying, that's what I was telling myself. But I remember because those things were set up for me, I started to see two things. Whoa, um, I'm really not showing up very well here.
Hmm.
Right. And it forced me to recognize that maybe some subconscious techniques I used to get what I wanted or to get comfort, or I wanted somebody else to comfort me. I realized through that process, I didn't know how to comfort myself. I didn't know
Mm.
how to be okay when I wasn't okay. And this person, by not engaging, by setting those things up for herself, was showing me that. And then the second thing I eventually saw, and again, I don't think it was ever spoken, but it came to me over time to the point where I didn't realize when that moment of understanding had arrived. I noticed that it arrived, was that this person was showing me, an enormous amount of love, of faith in me, belief in me, and a desire for us both to continue to grow in the relationship that we had.
Oh,
It could have
interesting.
been, and knowing this person the way I do, historically, she could be a very, yeah, I'm done, right? I'm done. I'm not going to put it, this is too
Mhm.
difficult or this is too annoying. I've got stuff that's going on. Don't have the energy for this. This person I realized slowly was choosing to continue to step into this space with me and allow me to be a part of that. And I started to see that for the act of love that it really was. And tying it back to last couple of weeks,
Mhm.
it wasn't what I thought I wanted or needed, but that turned out to be so much better because all of a sudden I started to see what that person was giving me in terms of love. And that was the opportunity to get myself settled and grow. And I do think that every successful relationship on some level has to find the place where both people are side by side, back to back, both growing, backing each other up,
Mhm.
holding each other accountable when necessary and however appropriate for the dynamics of the relationship. But above all, each growing and helping the other person manifest that growth to the best of their ability. I think in the end, that's how we define success in any loving relationship.
I would highly agree with that.
Oh, it's been your experience, I think, as
Yeah, and
well.
I mean, it's not easy. It's certainly tricky
It is.
because you're
It is.
balancing taking care of yourself and taking care of somebody else that you deeply care about.
And you fear losing
And
them
oh yeah. Well, and then there's always the idea of like, if I give up, do I give up one day too
too
like
soon.
too soon, you know?
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
is never
Better than
really
giving
a
up one day
way
too late, I guess, but
there's never really a way of knowing necessarily
no,
when
no.
is too far until you actually feel like it's been way too far. But
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you don't notice that until it's like you look back and go, "Yeah, I probably should have,
mhm,
pulled the plug or hit the eject button," as I said earlier, sooner. And we all have experience with that too, right? We can all
yeah.
look back and go, with a little clearer judgment and
Yeah,
separate
should
from
not have
emotions.
subjected myself to
Right,
things,
exactly.
but
But and there does, I want to once again, I want to say there can come a point where something has to end,
oh,
right?
yes,
It
yeah.
it does. And, in the situation you're talking about and the situation I'm talking about, I know and you know that we both made conscious decisions to stay in that,
Mhm.
right? It was the situation I was talking about. It was tough for me to go, okay, whoa, this person isn't just going to throw me a life preserver whenever I want it. And I actually don't need that. So what do I have to do to learn how to swim in
Oh.
this relationship? And and it turns out to be so much more important than just that relationship, as important as
Mhm.
that one is. It's affected all of them. It's one reason why, for example, our relationship is the way it is because, we both were working through these things when we met, have
Yeah.
continued to work through them, and they've continued to grow and change. And I'm happy to say improve,
Mhm.
right, for both of us. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to bring to a new friendship, to bring to, a new collaboration like we have.
Mhm.
And that's a great thing, but it is work and it does take patience, empathy, and a recognition that there is no clear answer as to when something might be enough, right?
I think for me, it always boiled down to, like, is this person really worth it to me? Like, who
Mm,
they are at the core of them that I know them to be, and I wasn't trying to make up floofy stories of who I think they are.
right.
I'm like, "No, who are they, like, really, really?"
Yeah,
And
like
if
we talked about last week,
yeah,
right?
like, you really look at the core of them, and it's like, okay, if what you see in there is great and worth it to you, and you think that they can get back to that,
Mhm.
then great.
And the thing you have to allow when we do that is you have to allow that a person, you can see all of that through all the ugly
All
things,
the muck, yeah.
through all the muck. And and in my experience, in the relationship I was talking about for me, I'm so grateful that person was able to do that. They were able to do that with me long before I was ever able to do that with them.
Mm.
And the tables have turned. This person would tell you, and she's listening, I'm sure.
Hi.
Yeah, she would tell you that it was reversed as well at times. There were times where in other areas, she was the one who had to kind of figure out the space she was in, and I'm on the other side,
Mm.
allowing for that space and being better able to see her. And so it turned into a really good mutual thing where we found that ground where the last few years we have stood so much more often side by side, back to back in the relationship that we're in that has its own definitions and its own dynamics where we recognize that in each other and,
Hmm.
and can tell when the sides of the person that aren't always their best are coming to play. And actually, one of the things I get excited about is we're both able to name that when we're having, one of our catch up phone calls or something like that.
Oh,
Both
really?
able to name that. Yeah, this part of me keeps coming up. And it not isn't necessarily about the other person, but
Mhm.
just in something else.
Hmm.
And it's funny because it's easy then to hear them go, "Hey, you know that part of you that came up at such and such a time? There it is again. What's that about?" Right? It's always interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's the best conversation partner I have anywhere, by the way. And because of that.
Love that.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great.
It's great. But it's those things are the rewards are palpable. You get to them. And I would say that they would be palpable even if something didn't work. If
Mhm.
you left open the space and that it just wasn't enough or, wasn't working at some point, the rewards of that I think can be palpable too, right? Because then you can
Mhm.
look yourself in the mirror and know you did everything you could
Mhm.
to the point where you no longer could sacrifice whatever it was
Right.
about yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
That boundary is crucial for
Mhm.
survival through something like that,
It is.
is knowing that you always have the option to leave, and it is okay if you do.
Yeah, it is. And it sometimes can take a long time to get there. You
Mhm.
know, I have another dear friend who just went through something like that. And, um, And there was a lot of back and forth, right, on whether this particular connection she had with somebody needed to continue. And eventually she found it, and it was no, and I would say to her a lot, I don't think there's a timetable on this. I think you have to go until you know
Mhm.
that you're done. And it can be really easy for anybody to look back and go, oh, I wish I would have come to that realization 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever it might be. But I do believe, and I would tell clients this, and I have told clients this, you stayed until you knew you no longer could.
Yes.
And I'm glad, certainly we can look back and go, okay, well, maybe there would have been less harm if we'd made that decision earlier. But we have to be sure of the decision
Well,
when we make it.
that's partially why people don't make the decision,
Right.
because they're afraid that if making the decision, it's the wrong decision that they're
Mhm.
making.
Right.
And I would encourage those to spend a lot of time with yourself and really knowing your own intuition,
Mhm.
because that kind of becomes your guiding compass when things are really difficult, because you have your great moments and you're like, "Oh, we're turning a page, we're getting somewhere," and then it may plummet the next day.
Yeah.
And then that can be devastating. And like you said, it is so true. There just kind of comes a moment where you get this clarity, and all of a sudden it's like a settling and you're like, I'm okay.
Yeah. For this moment, however long this takes to sift.
Well, and
Sure.
it can also be like, I'm okay to leave.
Mhm.
This is enough, and it's not gonna be like a horrible argument. It's not gonna be like terrible things are said to each other, and I wanna storm out in anger, because anger is easier to deal with than
Right.
pain.
They might. The other person might.
They might. Says more about them,
Right.
but, there can be a moment, and I speak of that from personal experience, that I've had moments in life where 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I wouldn't be able to make that decision.
Yeah.
But now that I know myself well enough and I'm like, "Oh, there's the sign,"
Mhm. Mhm.
and then you make the decision and you leave.
Yep. Yep. And it's such a good reminder too, that this process is such a good reminder for me. And again, I talk about it with clients, to this idea that sometimes we throw around as a cliche, that a relationship is a decision every day to be in it. Right.
Mhm.
And it's easy to say that. And yet it's really true no matter what the relationship is. Just because someone is your parent or your child, you still have to commit to being that this is the relationship you want to have, or you want to keep working at it. You want to still fight for it, whatever it might be, grow through it. A marriage, you may have said vows to promise to do this, this, and this, but you still have to choose it every day.
Mhm.
Right. And what are the marriages that run into, what are the ones that run into, trouble most often? Ones where people forget
Mhm.
that every day it's choosing that, no matter
Yeah.
what the vows said, no matter what ring you have on your finger, no matter what you've built around you. In the end, to say that everything is guaranteed to work out, right, is only if two people are choosing every single day
Mhm.
to make it work out. And there is no guarantee of that, right? But
That's
that
right.
does allow us, I think, to stay more present
Mhm.
in the relationship and choose more clearly, more clear eyed, whether or not we want to be there that day. And then do the next day, or the
Mhm.
next day, or the next
And the day and
year,
the day after
right?
that.
Whatever it might be, right? Exactly. Okay. Whew, good stuff. All right. So, Ashley, when we come back from our second break, let's talk more about this. Not just
Let's
because
just
we
keep
have 18
going.
more minutes, but because there's so much more to say. So, come
This
on
is true.
back here on Staying Power. See you in a minute.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Don't ask me to talk. There's a lot of talk out there. political talk, sports talk, girl talk, trash talk, and so on. But there's only one, Don't Ask Me to Talk, helmed by conversational off-roaders and podcast pals Eric Ryder and Stacey Heller. They follow every tangent they encounter, from cultural blind spots to their infamous weekly Wheelo topics. Listen wherever you listen to your fave podcasts. Subscribe and share too. Or tune in every Saturday at 3 p.m. or Tuesday at 4 p.m. on KKNW.
Alternative Talk 1150. It's good for what ails you. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA.
Welcome back to Staying Powered. JD here with Ashley.
Hello.
We're talking about holding space in relationships. We've covered a lot of different ground. And what I appreciate most, Ashley, is that we're talking about how this is a mutual thing, right? We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to give ourselves space to take a look at who we are, what it is we're doing, what are we bringing to a relationship, what are the things that we need to shift, rather than make every single thing about the other person needing to grow to quote unquote catch up to us, right? That's not what we're talking about. So
Sure.
I love the fact that we ended up back at personal accountability and the ability to see ourselves.
There
and
is a
see
common
others.
thread here.
There is. All right. So the last segment of every episode, we hope we're giving some practical takeaways. Sometimes that's advice. Other times it's just things that we've done or we've seen clients do that have worked well for them. So let's talk about some of those, Ashley, that come to mind. The first one comes to mind to me is, what are some things you can do? Creating a collaborative timeline. If someone is able to address this and say, hey, look, this isn't something A, B, or C is not working. I don't think we're in the same place on this. I'm trying to figure this out. Having a timeline of not necessarily when everything has to be fixed, but a timeline for communicating about it, for checking in. Is it once a week? Is it once a month? Whatever that might be, seems to be important. And why are you laughing?
Sorry. As soon as you said that, like, I know somebody that came to mind that I'm like, yep, they would do that.
Oh, okay.
And they would probably have it very structured and very like graphed out.
Oh,
like,
yes. Okay. Do I know who we're talking about? Yes, we do. Okay. We have a mutual friend who, yes, that's exactly what they would do. Okay. But does that take away from my idea as far as, okay. Okay.
No, I think that's good because there are some people like that who would appreciate.
Yeah. Need it laid out.
It really helps them to have it structured and laid out, very clear plan of action. No wasted time, energy, effort, so on and so forth. Everyone is very clear on the concept.
Yeah. You and I are a lot more smudgy than this person.
Smudgy.
Smudgy.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, we're not quite as rigid.
Okay. What are some other practical things where this can be applied?
I would say try to take note of the small wins that you have.
Okay.
And these could look like literally anything. You have a day where you both agree on something. Awesome. I'm talking like this could be a wide range of examples, of maybe it's a really tumultuous situation. And so the smallest of wins is good. But if you can create opportunity for small wins where you can empower the other person or they can empower you, you can go and try something new together. Especially, I like that idea because as you're trying something new that neither one of you has done, you're creating a bond between the two of you.
Shared experience.
Especially if it's something you both are afraid of, then you bond better together.
Or you yell at each other for who talked us into this.
Right? Like whose idea?
Whose idea was this?
Or you could do like one of those like breakout rooms or whatever. No, that's not what they're called.
Those
you know
mystery rooms.
Yes, where you have to like solve puzzles together to like get out of it.
I suppose that's safer than trying out skydiving together, but that could be.
You never know.
Never know.
Whatever your jam is, but doing things together. And to be honest, like maybe other half is not super excited, but as long as they are willing to go and maybe they're doing it just because it was your idea, that's okay. Even if they roll their eyes, they're like, I'm only going because you're forcing me. That's okay. Take it as a win.
I would encourage that other person, even if they're not excited about it, to take a look at it as an opportunity to see through the other person's eyes why they're so excited about it. What can that, if one person is interested in doing something, what is it about that person that they're so interested in this? It might be a reminder of something that drew you to them in the first place.
Ooh, that's a really
or
good
connected you in the first place. It might also be a chance to learn something new about them, right? And that's really where relationships get recharged. is when either somebody sees again, almost like seeing it again for the first time, something about that person that they forgot,
Ooh.
or see something new at them that they go, whoa, where has that been? Oh my gosh, it's been there the whole time. And
Mhm.
I just haven't seen it. And then being able to share that, right?
Yes, those moments, love that you mentioned that because completely agree. I love those moments when you see them for like the first time all
Yeah,
over
something
again.
new. Yeah.
Something happens and you're like, "Oh my gosh, yes, that's why."
Mhm.
I love them for that, or
Yeah.
that always inspired me, or I
Right.
always thought it was so funny, that
Mhm.
aspect about them,
Yeah.
like those little things, those are wins, and it's okay to tell them.
Yes. Share.
Share it,
Share that.
especially if they are ones going through something really difficult,
Yeah.
whatever it might be, and they constantly have a little gray cloud that covers them
Mhm.
all day, every day, and they're in
Mhm.
some sort of depression or something.
Yeah.
It's okay to, like, still be a little bit of a light. Not too much because some people think it's too bright and annoying, but
Mhm.
it's okay to still share a little drop of goodness and mention
Absolutely.
things like that.
Absolutely. We always hear that words can both uplift and
Mhm,
also cut,
mhm.
and yet the lack of them gives the other person the opportunity for them to fly all around not knowing where they
Yeah.
stand, how you feel, all those things. So words shared, even if you're not sure what the words are,
Mhm.
to me that's mutual vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that to me is a key part of this too, is it can be an indicator. To what degree are each of you in the relationship showing, even if it's little, a little more vulnerability around something, a little more openness to sharing about it, to hearing about it, to taking in input,
Mhm.
or, not even necessarily advice. That could be really touchy, right? Giving advice. It might just be more important to share it and not to bring judgment to it from one side. That gives, particularly if we don't judge it, we just listen to it, that active listening. It allows that person to be a little more gracious with themselves
Yep.
in that process. All right. So those are good. I like that. Another one, oh, you mentioned it before. I do think it matters. Engaging in self-care, what that looks
Yep.
like. I've
Absolutely.
said many times to people in recovery, to my clients, to myself, um, whatever dynamic you have in this relationship, that person cannot be both your biggest problem and your idealized solution at the same time.
Oh, that's good.
They can't, right? Not for if you want the relationship to be successful,
Mhm.
which means you need other people, right? You need other
Yep.
places to go. You need other circles, even if they have no idea what's happening. You have to have other circles that you can go into where you can be some version of yourself that's authentic. You can maybe it can be a circle where you get away from this entirely because they know nothing about it. Circle
Mhm.
at a gym, in your case, at a dojo, right? Something like that. That can be important. Who are the people that you go to who can model not being judgmental, who can hold space for you in this struggle? They may have their opinions about why are you still putting up with this or
Right.
that kind of thing, but who are going to hold that because they see you, and the interaction you have with them can be a model on how you can bring it into this relationship where you're
Oh,
having a
that's really
problem.
good.
Yeah.
Actually, that's really vital if you can find that, and again, holding space, like we said, is a gift. So for somebody to be able to hold space for you while you're holding space for somebody else
Mhm.
is
Well said.
interesting.
Well said.
But it is if you can find that, and it doesn't have to be many people, it could just be one
Mhm.
person or two people. I would suggest maybe not necessarily family or your
Mm.
closest
Right.
mutual friends.
Right.
You don't wanna put people in an awkward place where
Yeah.
then they learn things and then they have to pretend like all's fair in love and war.
And they feel they have
Uh,
to choose.
yeah, anything like that, but and it could be someone, like, totally out of the blue that you build a connection and a friendship with, and it's not that you're going and just complaining about this
Mhm.
person. You are sharing and they are able to give you space and clarity enough so you can return back to your situation with clarity
Yeah.
and a lightness about you.
Yeah, because hopefully in that process, you've been able to unload
Mhm.
some of the things that might actually be getting in the way for you, this other person. And maybe you experience that thing like, oh, I just saw this in my friend.
Yep.
Oh, I was reminded. Oh, because what that does neurologically for us is gives us a template that our brain and our
Mhm.
bodies keep going back to, like, okay, I recognize that in my friend over here or this experience here. What can I recognize in this relationship here that I'm being so challenged by,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, and if they're doing something as they're like holding space for you and the way that they're handling something you're talking about, or maybe it's their way of approaching something and you're like, wow, that felt really good for me. You can take that and turn around and do it at home
Yeah.
or with your friend or
Yeah.
whoever it is that you're going through something rough with.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. And the one thing I would stress really, really with this, in order to do this, there has to be a willingness that you have to find, cultivate, practice to really sit and be still with yourself. And by that, I mean distraction free, phone down, TV off, being able to take time. Maybe it's on a walk. If you don't like sitting still and meditating, I tend to do that. But I also sometimes it just doesn't work and I need to be up and moving. I need to be out walking on my daily walk. I need to be on the spin bike. I need to sometimes, if I'm sitting in my car driving someplace, turn off the radio. Sometimes I need to speak out loud to myself or to nobody in particular to hear these things. And with the focus on, okay, where am I at? What might be in the way? Like you suggested earlier in the show, what might I be contributing to this that I can take a look at and maybe mitigate a little bit more? I think a more willingness to spend that time with ourselves and to feel the emotions that come with that: uncertainty, fear, sadness, frustration, hopefulness, compassion. Those things can be uncomfortable to try and hold all at the same time, particularly if they kind of pile up one after the other, as they tend to do in these relationships that are most important to us. I think the very practice of that stretches and it opens up our bandwidth to hold these things a lot more. And we are designed as human beings to be able to hold a number of different emotions at the same time and learn how to be okay with them and not have them spin us off into just self-destructive behavior or careless words or negative self-belief. So those, to me, I think comes back to ourselves. It's so interesting. We were talking about holding space for others, and what do we end up talking about? Well, what are we bringing?
It's good to hold space for yourself too.
Yes, it is.
As you're going through something. You don't always have to have all the answers right away. You can learn and grow and make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else come up for you, Ashley, in the last few minutes?
No, I think we kind of covered everything.
We covered it. There's a lot to it. Well, that's okay, because we are coming down to the end of another episode of Staying Power. If we would love to hear from you more on these things. It's one thing when we're talking about unrequited love in the last couple of weeks, and that's something that I think probably all of us have experienced in some way. I know for a fact every single person who's had a relationship with anybody in any way has probably run into this, what we've talked about today, right? This, I think, is a universal human experience, right? But we don't always know how to navigate this. And we aren't taught, or at least our generations have not been taught, how to recognize this and how to work through it. We're so often told on social media that, no, hard line all the time, person's got to do this, this, and this, and this, and this if they want to get close. And I understand where that comes from. But at the same time, in a relationship that you want to have where both are expressing interest in having it grow, holding that kind of hard line is kind of a non-starter, right? You can end up spending a whole lot of time by yourself that you don't want to. That's how it is. And no one can have any opportunity of growing or bouncing around or showing any willingness or ability to change. And so I think I would encourage everybody in the last minute here to just let things stay messy and uncertain, right?
You heard it right here. Stay messy.
With all these other things,
Yeah.
with all these other things, because that's recognizing reality. All right. Ashley, thank you so much for all you shared on this today.
Likewise, JD.
Absolutely. I'm glad we've always known we've had this in common, and
we just like sharing things.
glad we like sharing things. Yeah. And all that stuff. So we hope all of you listening got something out of that as well. Love to hear from you at stayingpowershow@gmail.com or on our social media feeds at our website, 1150 AM KKNW, and on our YouTube channel. And there's more stuff coming soon, everybody. We're excited about some things we're working on that we'll be sharing with you soon. You're going to see a few interesting upgrades here pretty soon with what we're doing.
So exciting.
Excited about that. So I will be back next week with another episode about how you can build a better life. And hopefully we have something to say about it. I'm sure we will. Until then, I'm JD.
I'm Ashley.
We'll see you soon.